If this is one of the banks that is going down, what does that say for the health of all the other banks? What we really want to end up with is one mega bank. We're going to end up paying for it in some sort of way. Oh yeah, Credit Suisse. What's happening with Credit Suisse, man?
So it's here to talk about containing the banking contagion in the broader market is Bob Diamond, CEO and founding partner of Atlas Merchant Capital. He's also the former chief executive of Barclays. We'd call $3 billion like small most of the time, but these are two big institutions. It's just that the equity at this point is only worth, and that's probably generous at $3 billion. Things are done differently over across the pond. You have very good familiarity with that. What did you think of how this was arranged in the individual components of the deal itself, like what's happening to some bondholders? I guess they weren't bondholders.
Yeah. I look at 2008 and I look at our own experience with the acquisition of Lehman Brothers and how different that was than what just happened, Joe. And, in 2008, with Bear Stearns failing and being taken over by JP Morgan around Easter, I think it was, between then and when we acquired Lehman's U.S. business, it was like 6 months, 5 months. We had 3 or 4 board meetings to discuss if there's another shoe to fall. Lehman, Barclays, is it a fit? Lehman and Barclays Capital was an extraordinary fit. We had meetings with the Treasury about if there's another shoe to fall with Bob Steele, what would the process look like? And so we really wanted to acquire Lehman. It was like a high-performing organization with a really bad portfolio of commercial real estate. If somehow you could resolve that commercial real estate, much like Merrill Lynch, much like Morgan Stanley, much like Goldman Sachs, they all had an issue with credit, but were really high-performing operations if you could solve that problem. So we really went after Lehman, and in the first year, we paid $1.75 billion, so not that different than the price being paid here. We thought of it as the price of the building, and I think that's what they're thinking of it in Switzerland. It was $10 billion in income in the first year. This is very different. This is a shotgun marriage.
And they're saying Switzerland's standing as a financial center is shattered. Octavio Morenzi, CEO of Optima, said in a research note, the country will now be viewed as a financial banana republic. The Credit Suisse debacle will have serious ramifications for other Swiss financial institutions. If this is one of the banks that is going down, what does that say for the health of all the other banks? And weren't they just assessed last year? I'm sorry, but didn't I swear they passed the stress test. Yeah, in 2022, Credit Suisse core capital ratio. Yeah, Credit Suisse, here it is. Here's this bullshit. There you go. So just last year, guys, Credit Suisse's U.S. operations passed the annual stress test, even the severely adverse scenario from U.S. regulators. And they also passed the EU stress test as well. So just a year ago, mainstream media was telling you, and all the regulators were telling you, that Credit Suisse is doing a good old job. Don't worry about it.
I mean, this is a forced association. And I think if you believe what you read, then the chairman of UBS, Colm Kelleher, was saying for weeks and weeks and months that wasn't the right solution. So this was very much a forced marriage in my mind, this wasn't a solvency issue for Credit Suisse. They failed. They're bankrupt. They can't make money. I think the real issue is you look out at the next couple of years, it's very hard to create a scenario where they're profitable. And I think that was
UBS shareholders
very different.
Get the short end of the stick on this, to not even be allowed to vote on this and to have it crammed down their throat?
There was all kinds of issues around this, Becky, which I was surprised to see that the shareholder vote. We had the same issue in 2008, which is being a UK bank. If you recall, over the weekend, we tried to acquire the full bank, and we needed the Fed to guarantee funding on Monday morning, because it required for Barclays a shareholder vote, which you can't get, on a Sunday night. So I don't know all the intricacies of why they did that, but it didn't sound good for sure. I do think that, as I sit back and look.
And look at this horseshit too. In the most recent stress test, the 34 biggest banks, including JP Morgan Chase & Co. and Citigroup Inc., were able to maintain strong capital levels even in the event of a drastic shock. If that's the case, then why didn't we let SVB go under completely? Why did we come to the rescue? Oh, are you worried? This is the contagion that they're worried about, right? So if we pass the worst stress test imaginable, think about it. Yeah, somebody said it right there, consolidation. What we really want to end up with is one mega bank. That's what we're working towards, slowly and surely.
At UBS today, from all the things I can see that they put into this transaction, it's very, very good for UBS. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know if Andrew is on, but
I love the way they sell this too. UBS Credit Suisse deal creates wealth management titan. Others stand to gain. Yeah, they got bought for pennies on the dollar.
Author of Too Big to Fail. This is like, we just defined a new a new era in Too Big to Fail, which is you've combined Credit Suisse and UBS. Right. So the two biggest banks in the country, most branded by being the home of banking. The original home of banking. If you don't have banking in Switzerland, it's chocolates, mm-hmm. It's watches. Right. It's like Bob, Germany saying that they're out of auto manufacturing.
Yeah, it says a number of Credit Suisse bondholders said Tuesday that they were considering legal action after 17 billion of the bank's additional Tier 1 AT1 bonds were wiped out as part of its emergency sale to UBS. So Swiss regulators basically forced that merger, huh? That's essentially what just happened. So nobody wanted to buy Credit Suisse. Wow. And the bondholders got screwed. Wow. What was this other one here?
I saw to talk about.
Well, I'm not sure if your firm was the one that a reporter had alluded to there, but I'll ask you directly now. How many calls have you fielded these last few days from Credit Suisse employees?
In the hundreds, I believe. Yeah, and it's across front, middle, and back office. But I would say largely, we're hearing mostly from the people in capital markets, so investment banking.
And what are you telling?
Look, man. Oh, my God. It says Single Resolution Board, SRB, and the European Banking Authority issued a joint statement seeking to reassure investors that the Credit Suisse deal is a one-off. Switzerland is not part of the European Union, and so is not subject to the bloc's regulations. In particular, common equity instruments are the first ones to absorb losses, and only after their full use would additional Tier 1 be required to be written down. EU authorities insist. Oh, gets worse.
But so aren't you just a private investor who's taking some pain?
Well, the question in Credit Suisse is was Credit Suisse failing? I mean, we're talking about a bank, who had 14.7, I think, % of CET1. A liquidity coverage ratio, after all the deposit redemptions at around 144%. So, much higher than, for example, the average US bank. And you had the FINMA saying that the bank is not insolvent. So, I mean, I'm happy to say, when a bank, fails, then, of course, you proceed to the wind down of the bank. And, of course, you apply the hierarchy of claims. And when the equity holders are wiped out, then you move to the bondholders. That's what happens. But here, we're talking about a bank which failed between bracket with 14-point-something% of CET1 and full of liquidity.
So we have to take at face value that the deposit flight was significant enough towards the end of last week that the authorities had to move in, or they felt they had to move in very quickly to stabilize the situation. Otherwise, the outcome could ultimately be worse. Let's take it as read that it was failing and it needed this action taken. Do you think the decision that was made to allow some of the equity holders to get capital and you to not get capital was politically motivated by the anchor shareholders in that bank? The fact that it was Middle Eastern money,
And that's what I've been hearing too, that the Saudis pulled out, has something to do with BRICS. This goes in with the Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, all coming together, starting to kick the petrodollar out. They're wanting to see one of Europe's oldest institutions, one of the West's oldest banking institutions crumble. So,
which we know is very important these days to the asset management industry in Switzerland.
Most likely, that's the only logical explanation. But I think the decision is still very bad. The additional tier 1 really are a key pillar of the capital stack of banks. It's a full important part of the Basel III agreement, and that means that you can't trust anymore the capital stack of a bank. So that's why I think it was absolutely key for the European authorities and the UK authorities to yesterday came out, reassuring investors on the fact that, in the UK and in the EU, the capital stack would be respected and the hierarchy of claims would be respected in case of a bank failure. I think that's absolutely key.
David, can we get into what it said on the tin around these CoCos? The yield was much higher than other AT1s.
Okay, back to this guy.
I mean, this is coming at a time where the banks itself are cutting costs and shedding jobs. Are there jobs for them?
To be honest, I don't think there's enough jobs out there to, accommodate all the job seekers, right? So they will have to be, I guess, open-minded, right? When it comes to getting the next role, it could be, taking on something in a related area. I think key is really to stay employed in such uncertain times, right? Because the longer you stay away, your market value will drop.
Well, that's it, isn't it? So, what are the other...
I love how they're blaming social media. It was caused by Twitter, guys, not by poor banking practices. SVP sudden collapse wasn't a social media triggered Twitter run. So they were blaming it earlier on a Twitter run, and then MarketWatch is saying no. It's what people always do when their money is threatened. Senators warn that the next U.S. bank run could be rigged. Here we go. We're putting the blame. Who we blaming now? Virginia Senator Tim. Who knows and who cares? Because it's all just lip service. Nothing's going to change. They all get paid behind closed doors. And your money's going to be the one that disappears. The government's response to the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, depositors' money was quickly protected, shows banks can be hardened against this kind of event. Yeah, with taxpayer dollars, pretty much. We're going to end up paying for it in some sort of way, whether costs get passed down to us or whatever else. I think they try to make it easier to swallow that, and they were saying that multiple other banks came in to shore up capital, which they will pass down the cost to the consumer. What the f*** is new? Disgusting, right? Too big to fail. All right, that was a good little Credit Suisse episode.